Welcome to At Issue. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm H. Wayne Wilson. I want to share a couple of numbers with you. We happen to know that 98% of incumbents are reelected in Illinois legislative races. 98% of incumbents in general elections are reelected. We're going to talk about why that number is so high, and we're going to be talking about an effort to change the way districts are shaped in the state of Illinois. And to help us with that conversation is Jan Zarnick. Jan is the Executive Director of the Illinois League of Women Voters. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And Brad McMillan is here. Brad wears several hats. He, of course, is at Bradley University with the Institute for Principled Leadership in Public Service. But more importantly for this conversation, Brad is a member. Does the commission still exist?
Technically it does.
Okay, is a member of the Illinois Reform Commission, one of the duties of which was?
Well, we had 100 days to report back to the governor and to the General Assembly on how we clean up Illinois government and politics. And the area that I focused my attention on was redistricting. And we brought in experts from across the country that gave us best practice models, and Illinois was not on that list by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, our current process is probably the worst in the country. And so we, in our report, called for sweeping reform, and that framework is now what makes up the Illinois Fair Map Amendment.
And we'll talk about Fair Map in just a moment, but a couple of more numbers just to put this all in perspective. We mentioned 98% are reelected, those who choose to run again. There are some more numbers. Of the 547 races since 2001, the last time redistricting took place, of 547, 536 incumbents won re-election. And 45% of those races were uncontested races. Is that due in part because of some of the way that some of the districts are configured?
Yes, it's due largely to the way the districts are drawn, coupled with the huge amounts of money that legislative leaders are allowed to put into the races of the incumbents that they would like to see reelected. We at the League recently, by recently I mean about a year and a half ago, we started saying to each other, you know, year after year after year after year after year, we find ourselves working on the same issues in the state of Illinois. We find ourselves going down to the General Assembly and talking to the same representatives and senators about the same issues and getting nowhere. And a huge part of the reason that we got nowhere is that for most of them, their re-elections are virtually guaranteed regardless of what they do or what they fail to do. So we decided that it was really time for the League to step up and say to the people of Illinois, if you want a state government that's working better, you really have to change the way we do redistricting in Illinois.
Before we talk about, and there is a petition process underway that would lead to a constitutional change on the November ballot. But before we do that, how are districts formed right now?
Right now, the current process, and we're all seeing the commercials on the census coming up, and if we don't do anything to change the process, the politicians behind closed doors, in secret, will draw the legislative districts, and they'll look at your voting history and my voting history and Jan's and everybody else's, and they'll create either safe Democratic districts or safe Republican districts. And that's why we get the 98% incumbent re-election rate in the state of Illinois. There's no transparency. And then on top of that, if the Republicans and Democrats don't agree on maps, which they haven't for the last 30 years, they put a Republican name and a Democrat name in a hat. One year they used Abraham Lincoln's stovepipe hat. The Secretary of State pulls that name out of the hat, and then that party gets to control the legislative map drawing process. It's a crazy process. In no way is it justifiable, and it simply doesn't serve the best interests of the people of the state of Illinois.
And 10 years ago, the Democrats drew the long straw.
Correct.
Before we go any further, I need to point out that there is what appears to be an effort to for legislation in Springfield. There is a Senate redistricting committee chaired by Kwame Raoul, and he is leading an effort that may end up in legislation. That legislation would also go before the public in a vote. I want to point out that we invited both Senator John Sullivan of that commission and Kwame Raoul, and they both chose not to participate because of commitments to their constituents. We'll continue with Fair Map. So the League is heading this up, but it's really a group of organizations.
Yes, well, the League headed it up in the sense that, as I said, about a year and a half ago, we had a conversation among ourselves wherein we decided we really needed to step up and do something about not only a better census count in Illinois, but also to reform then the way the ensuing redistricting would be done. So we attended every one of the hearings the Senate Redistricting Committee had, and we listened to all the expert testimony and reviewed all of the papers that the various experts submitted. We consulted members of the Reform Commission, particularly Brad McMillan. We consulted the Brennan Center for Justice at New York University School of Law. They are the nation's preeminent center on voting rights and redistricting issues. We worked with Virginia Martinez. She's the legislative director for the Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund. I first met Virginia in 1982. She was litigating the map that had been drawn in the 1981 redistricting. So she is a state expert, particularly on minority voting rights issues. We talked with every other reform organization in Illinois to see what their level of interest was in undertaking redistricting reform. And finally, last fall, we sat down, all those of us who were interested in bringing a citizen initiative to the public, sat down and worked out the concepts and the language of the proposal and brought it to the public in early December.
And the coalition has been growing, Age. It not only includes the League of Women Voters leading the charge and almost every reform group in the state of Illinois, but it also now includes the Illinois State Chamber of Commerce, the Illinois Farm Bureau. It's a very diverse, broad-based group of organizations that just want to bring back good government to the state of Illinois. And after everything we've been through, we're hoping that the people will rally around this, because this is fundamental to bringing back good government in the state of Illinois.
And one thing I've noticed, I was mentioning to Brett earlier, I was sick last week, had a bad cold. I had to spend a few days at home. And so in the hours that I was awake, I was looking at the fans on our Facebook page. And it's an interesting collection of activists who aren't really part of any organization necessarily. So we're delighted to see, in addition to our organizational support, we just have a lot of people out there who understand how important this issue is and how important it is to change the way we do this in Illinois.
I want to talk about what you envision as the new process, but before we do that, would you talk a moment, Jan, about what the voters are going to see and how it might end up being on the ballot? Because there's no guarantee it's going to be on the ballot yet.
No, there is no guarantee. The most important thing that people can do right now is to get a petition, to sign the petition, and to get others to sign the petition. It's very easy to get the petition. Our website is ilfairmap.com. Anyone can go to the website and download the petition for their election jurisdiction. It's essential that people only circulate the petition for the election jurisdiction where the voters are registered. So, for instance, in Peoria, you don't have an election authority for the city of Peoria,
Yes,
or do you?
yes, we do.
Oh, I'm sorry. Peoria is one of the few places in the state
There's
where
8 of
you.
them.
Yes, yes. So
And
where
we're
you
one,
have,
and Bloomington is
and
one as well.
Bloomington is one, right? So in Peoria and Bloomington in the city, the people who live in the cities have to sign the city petition. The people who live in the rest of the county have to sign the county petition, and that's a very important distinction. If you sign the wrong petition, your signature won't be counted.
And there's a threshold of a number of signatures and a deadline?
We need 282,000 valid signatures to be filed with the Secretary of State by May 2nd. But our goal is 500,000 signatures because we believe that our petitions will be challenged, and we want to make sure that we have enough of a cushion to withstand any challenges that are brought against our petition drive.
In preparing to discuss about what the form would be for this new process, let's take a look at a map here in just a moment of what some of the districts currently look like in the state of Illinois. This is for legislative districts, not congressional, and we see here there's a couple of them that are highlighted here.
The top one is Illinois Senate District 38, and the viewers can see that it has an interesting tail on the end of it. The reason that tail was drawn into that district was because the incumbent's fiance's residence was at the very bottom of that tail.
Right, and that's we're talking about that House district on the right, that little tail, literally, it's coming off on the far right
Circled in
bottom.
the pink. Yeah, okay.
Correct.
Yes.
And then the yellow one that
That's
goes from the St. Louis area on up.
yeah, that's Senate District 51, and what they did was they threw 4 incumbents into one district, and former State Senator Dwayne Nolan, who served on the Reform Commission with me, who was probably one of our best and brightest, ended up retiring from the General Assembly because of the way that map was drawn. The other thing about 51 is there's the community of Effingham that has 3 different Illinois senators that represent that small community because of the way these maps are drawn.
So that's one change that I know of, is that it's going to respect, to the degree possible, community boundaries in the proposal.
Yes, absolutely. No more splitting up. A small city like Effingham, I believe their population is 34,000. And communities like that have been split up for purely political reasons, to virtually guarantee the reelection of favored incumbents and to maximize the political power of one party or the other. And I do want to say about these 2 districts, this just happens to be 2 examples from the last time the map was done, and it just so happened that the Democrats had the power to draw the map in 2001. But in 1991, it was the Republicans who had the power to draw the map, and they didn't behave any better than the Democrats did. So this really...
So this isn't a partisan issue here.
No, not at all. It's my favorite quote from an incumbent legislator on this subject came from Senator Dale Ryder, who is the Republican spokesperson on the Senate Redistricting Committee. And at one of the hearings, he actually said, "Could we all have a moment of confession here and admit that both of our parties have done this?" So it's really been, as I said, it's an equal opportunity bad behavior in our view on the part of both political parties, and it has not served the people of Illinois well. As you know, as everyone who pays attention to state issues knows, our state's about to be driven off a cliff, and there's not one person in the General Assembly who hasn't understood that for some time, and yet here we are. None of the state's serious problems addressed. And we don't see any indication that they're going to be addressed anytime soon. And as I said earlier, the biggest reason for that is it doesn't matter how bad a job incumbents do. Their reelections are virtually guaranteed because the districts are drawn to virtually guarantee their reelections.
So community boundaries are going to be respected. Then there's this denesting. What's that? That's the House versus the Senate?
Yeah, right now, the way the maps are drawn is the 2 House districts have to fit within a Senate district. What our process would be to denest the House and Senate districts, so there'd be a Senate map and a House map that would be totally independent of each other, and you wouldn't have to try to fit 2 House districts into one Senate district. You know, the other important points of our plan, H, are that we want to turn the process over to an independent bipartisan commission as the first step in drawing the maps, with total transparency, with public input, and again, that would be totally different than the current system.
So the General Assembly they wouldn't even start with this map process under your proposal?
Yes, under our proposal, not only would they not start with the process, there's no point in our process when the members or the leaders of the General Assembly would be drawing the districts. The leaders would appoint the members of the commission, but they are very restricted. You cannot appoint current legislators or lobbyists or state employees or contractors. And the huge difference in terms of that part of the process is those 8 partisan members, the 4 Republicans and 4 Democrats, must agree on the 9th person, who then essentially becomes the tiebreaker. No more pulling the name of one partisan person or another out of a hat, and so that the winner takes all. There's no winner-take-all possibility in our construction of the commission. They must come to bipartisan agreement. They also have to strictly follow the criteria we've laid out, because those criteria then would be in the state constitution. So minority voting rights would be protected, municipal and other geographic boundaries would be respected, and there would be no drawing of districts to protect incumbents or to advantage or disadvantage one party or the other.
Would the governor have a role under your proposal?
No, the governor would have no role.
None whatsoever. Not appointing anybody to
No,
a commission?
no role whatsoever.
And the Democrats have not put a proposal forward, as I mentioned, the Senate Democrats. There's one that at the time of this taping, they have not. There's a possibility they would put one forward. It also would have to go before the public in the form of a referendum. What happens if they pass something in the legislature and it goes on the ballot and your petitions are also approved? Do you have 2 different competing?
There is a very, very slight possibility of that, but we really are very skeptical that any legislative constitutional amendment will pass this spring. We believe that the Fair Map Amendment will be the only redistricting amendment that will be on the ballot on November 2nd.
Let me talk about the Senate ideas.
Yes.
They've put forward some ideas. One of them is that they want to abolish the tiebreaker, and they would do that by appointing the Chief Justice and a justice of the opposite party from the Supreme Court. They would select a special master, as they call it. What's wrong with that?
They actually got that from our plan. That's the last step in the Fair Map Amendment plan. So we totally agree with that part of the plan. And they've also added a lot of transparency in their plan, again, taking it from our plan. So there has been some progress from where we were at last fall to where we're at on March 15th. But there are some significant differences from the Fair Map Amendment and what they're proposing. They want the legislators to still have first crack at drawing the maps.
Yes, that's in here. Mm-hmm.
And they want a 60% approval of the maps rather than a 2/3 bipartisan approval of the maps. And they also don't want to prohibit the map drawers from looking at political voting history, which is really how they come up with these crazy districts and all of the crazy lines is by looking at voting history. And so there is a big difference between the Fair Map Amendment and what the Senate Democrats are proposing.
Let me, go ahead.
I do want to say that, and I have spoken with the Senate Democrats many times about their proposal. From what the League sees, there is a big disconnect between what the incumbent members of the legislature think and what the public thinks should be done. The League, you probably know, or maybe you don't know, so let me say it's our 90th birthday
I did not know.
It's our 90th birthday this spring.
Happy birthday,
Thank
League.
you. We were founded by the suffragists, the women who had fought so hard to get women the right to vote. And when they got women the right to vote, they felt that women now needed to be educated about the issues of the day. And so that's really been our purpose for 90 years. And now, of course, we're perfectly happy to educate men as well about the issues of the day. But that's the whole reason we exist, to register and educate voters. Since we're so used to educating voters on complex issues, we really thought that getting these petitions signed was going to be a daunting task, explaining this to the public. We've been stunned by how easy it is. Our members use various pitches, whatever they're most comfortable saying, but it's some version of, hello, Did you know that members of the General Assembly draw the districts from which they run for re-election? And the voters go, what? Most of them didn't know that. They can't believe it. They're appalled. And then we get to the second sentence, which is, so would you sign this petition, because we're trying to reform, before we can even finish the sentence, they are literally grabbing the clipboard out of our hands to sign the petition.
Well, this experience pushes me to ask the next question of, are we to blame, we the citizens of Illinois, if that's the typical response? Maybe we're getting exactly what we deserve.
Well, and I would say this. There are huge issues and problems in Springfield. But I personally believe that the number one issue in the state of Illinois is apathy. And you hear people complain about Springfield or Washington, D.C. This is something that every registered voter in the state of Illinois can do to turn Illinois back in the right direction. They just need to sign a petition, they need to pass a petition, they need to get activated, they need to stop complaining, and they need to start doing something about it. Again, I'm going to give the website one more time, ilfairmap.com. You can download petitions, but I really do believe, you look at how many people voted in the primary election age, it was 15% of registered voters, but 8% of age-eligible voters in the state of Illinois. Look who we picked for some of our candidates. The people of Illinois need to take this seriously, and the only way we're going to get it turned around is if people get engaged.
And Brad's right. This is the easiest thing that every registered voter can do to actually get us a responsive state government.
Well, along the similar lines, let me read from, this is a news release from the Senate Redistricting Committee. And one of their bullet points is, allow everyone to participate in the map drawing process. And I'll read verbatim. The Senate Democrats' proposal would share all data through the State Board of Elections and allow people to submit their own map plans. While leaders Cross and Radonio, those are Republican leaders, while their plan would exclude Illinoisans from the process, Senate Democrats want to adopt a plan which gets everyone involved. I don't know who everyone is, and I don't know who the people are that can have input.
That's inaccurate, Age. Our process not only has complete transparency, but every step of the way the public has the ability to give input, to give their own maps. You might want to mention the Joyce Foundation and the...
Oh yes, the Joyce Foundation. They have funded the development of software and a website, which will be up fairly soon, and we'll also have the new census data as soon as it's available, and anyone who wants to can sign on to the website and draw a map to be submitted for consideration.
I don't think I want to take on that task, thank you.
But others
If you would
will.
like to, feel free. I don't think I want to even go there. So once, let's assume that you get 282,000 signatures that are valid.
Okay.
You withstand any challenge that might come forth. It goes on the ballot. What threshold is there for the ballot on November the 2nd?
I believe it's 3/5 of those voting on the question or a majority of those voting in the election.
Either or.
Either or.
Okay. Let's assume that those thresholds are exceeded. Then what's the timetable? What happens?
Well, it would be immediate. This would become part of the Illinois Constitution, so that when the new 2010 census data comes forward, then the Fair Map Amendment process is what would be automatically implemented.
Okay, and with that, we have run out of time. We thank you so much for joining us. Jan Zarnick, who's Executive Director of the Illinois League of Women Voters.
My pleasure.
Thank you for coming down from the southwest suburbs of Chicago.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
And Brad McMillan, who is a member of the Illinois Reform Commission and also at Bradley University with the Institute for Principled Leadership in Public Service. And we remind you once again that we did invite the Senate Democrats to join us here on At Issue, and because of conflicts in schedules, they chose not to participate. We thank you for joining us on At Issue. I'm H. Wayne Wilson. Join us next week for another edition of At Issue.